Stephen K. Bannon, the longtime advisor to former President Donald J. Trump, has reported for a 4-month sentence in federal prison on Monday after hosting the 2 final hours of his podcast from just outside the low-security facility in Danbury, Con. "We'll be as close to the prison as we can possibly get," said Mr. Bannon in a high-spirited interview over the weekend. And when the taping, which he cast as an unsubtle troll pointed at the Justice Department, is concluded, "I'll walk across the street and surrender." He surrendered shortly after noon Eastern Time. Mr. Bannon on Friday lost his last-ditch bid to avoid incarceration after the Supreme Court denied a request to postpone the sentence while he appealed a jury verdict that found him guilty of contempt for ignoring a congressional subpoena. As a result, the very public figure will remain out of view and off the air until just a few days before the November 5 election. But the right-wing firebrand insists that swapping his studio mic for a prison job and his trademark double-colored shirts for government khakis will have little impact on his influential War Room podcast. In fact, he claims it will only get bigger and more powerful while he's in custody. He has prepared for this moment for months, Mr. Bannon said, enlisting a team of nearly 20 guest hosts to continue pumping out the show, which streams its distinctive stew of unvaryingly pro-Trump political patter for 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday, plus 2 additional hours on Saturdays. That group includes Andrew Giuliani, the son of Mr. Trump's former lawyer Rudolph W. Giuliani Mr. Bannon's daughter, Maureen Noor bin Laden, the niece of Osama bin Laden, who is known for her belief in conspiracy theories, and Jeffrey Clark, who served in the Justice Department under Mr. Trump and faces criminal charges in Georgia in connection with efforts to overturn Mr. Trump's 2020 election loss there. They'll be responsible for managing the stream of Republican politicians, consultants, media figures, pollsters, policy experts, donors, intellectuals, and economists who use War Room as a bullhorn aimed directly at what is arguably Mr. Trump's most loyal and engaged base of support. Mr. Bannon said it would also feature Peter Navarro, a frequent War Room contributor and former trade advisor in the Trump administration, who is set to finish serving his own contempt of Congress sentence in prison on July 17th. "The show must go on," said Jack Posobiec, who will squeeze guest hosting duties in between episodes of his own popular political podcast. He interviewed Mr. Bannon in tandem with the Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk on Sunday night. He said he'd make sure that Mr. Navarro was whisked directly from the low-security prison in Miami, where he's been since mid-March, to Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention. But not everyone is sure that the absence in the critical final months of the presidential race won't leave a mark. Mr. Bannon ran Mr. Trump's successful 2016 campaign during its final months, and although he has no official role in this iteration, he speaks frequently with Mr. Trump and several of his top advisors about political matters. Most recently, Mr. Bannon said he and Mr. Trump discussed strategy going into last week's debate with President Biden. He's also a huge celebrity on the right, routinely drawing bigger crowds at events like PAC or Turning Point USA conferences than most politicians or any news media figure short of Tucker Carlson. "This is a big political blow," said Mike Davis, a former congressional aide and lawyer who has become one of Mr. Trump's top surrogates on legal issues. Steve Bannon is by far the intellectual leader and the general for the MAGA movement and can't be replaced. Mr. Davis, a frequent guest on War Room who has also been tapped to pinch hit as a host, noted that Mr. Bannon has a nearly unique ability to stir up action from the masses. "I get far more social media activity and donations when I go on Steve's show than any other platform, including Fox News," Mr. Davis said. "It will certainly be a void," agreed Lavra Loomer, a right-wing activist with her own podcast who also has strong ties to Mr. Trump. The ability of Mr. Bannon to reach the Make America Great Again contingent will be severely limited by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Although Federal Correctional Institution Danbury is a low-security prison, its rules nonetheless cap phone calls to 15 minutes at a time, with a total limit of 320 minutes of calls per month. Inmates are not allowed access to the internet and can send emails and texts only to approved recipients through a fee-based email system that can be monitored by prison officials. Prisoners are also required to perform a prison job, often in facility maintenance or kitchen duty for recent arrivals and short-timers. Clay Travis, a conservative radio host who also has a popular sports podcast, said that if he were going to prison, he'd be sure to call into his own show from behind bars. "I'd be getting my team together to figure out whether I could make phone calls to distribute the show," Mr. Travis said. Mr. Bannon said he has no such intentions. He compared prison to his regimented years as an officer in the Navy and intends to use his time there for focused work. He'll limit phone calls and visits to his lawyers, he said, and is asking his fans not to send him letters of support, which he insists he'll return unread. Instead, he said, he'll focus his free time on sending emails about the campaign to key people he wouldn't say who is on his approved list. He also plans to catch up on his reading. He has ordered 5 books to work through, among them the King James Bible, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and A History of the Russian Revolution. He believes that his temporary disappearance will serve as a motivator to the millions of faithful listeners who routinely make War Room one of the country's most listened to political podcasts. And, according to Mr. Possobeek, he'll get out just in time to help make the final push to Election Day triumph. "It's like an epic tale where the wizened leader isn't able to be there until the final battle," he said. "It's going to be very much like the return of Gandalf." Stephen K. Bannon, the longtime ally of former President Donald J. Trump, will have to report to federal prison on Monday after the Supreme Court rejected his final effort to stave off a 4-month sentence for contempt of Congress. In a single-sentence decision issued on Friday, the court rejected Mr. Bannon's request to remain free while he challenges his conviction on charges of defying a subpoena from the House committee that investigated the Jan. 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Mr. Bannon had filed a last-ditch petition to Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr. last week, asking for permission to hold off on surrendering to the authorities. In July 2022, Mr. Bannon was found guilty at a trial in Washington of ignoring the subpoena, which sought information about his role in the events of Jan. 6. Even though he was sentenced to 4 months in prison, he was initially allowed to remain free while he pursued a lengthy appeals process. Last month, however, a federal appeals court upheld his contempt conviction, and within a few weeks the judge overseeing his case, Carl J. Nichols, said he would have to start serving his time. In their petition to Justice Roberts, Mr. Bannon's lawyers said that if he was forced to report to prison next week, he would almost certainly serve his entire sentence before he could ask the full Supreme Court to hear his appeal of his guilty verdict. The court's current term ends on Monday, and Mr. Bannon is not expected to be released until just before the election in November. CNN reported this month that Mr. Bannon would serve his sentence at a low-security federal prison in Danbury, Con. A lawyer for Mr. Bannon did not respond to requests for comment. Mr. Bannon is likely to remain in custody even as he goes on trial in Manhattan in a separate case in which he stands accused of misusing money he had helped raise for a group backing Mr. Trump's attempts to build a wall on the southern border. That trial is scheduled to begin later this year, in the same state courthouse where Mr. Trump was convicted on charges of falsifying business records to cover up a sex scandal that threatened his 2016 run for the presidency. Mr. Bannon will become the second former aide to Mr. Trump to be jailed for failing to comply with a subpoena from the Jan. 6 committee. Peter Navarro, who advised Mr. Trump on trade issues, is approaching the end of his own 4-month term in a federal prison in Miami. The House panel had wanted to question Mr. Bannon and Mr. Navarro about their efforts to coordinate with Republican members of Congress to challenge the results of the election on Jan. 6. The committee members also wanted to ask Mr. Bannon about remarks he had made on his podcast, War Room, on Jan. 5, 2021, saying that all hell was going to break loose the following day. But Mr. Bannon ignored the committee's requests, and the House found him in contempt in October 2021. Almost a year later, when prosecutors took him to trial, he sought to defend himself by blaming his lawyer for advising him to defy the panel.